To start off my new nature themed series, we are updating an oldie but a #1 fan favorite called the Layer Cake Log Cabin, which uses only a layer cake. Now, for the fabrics, I am using the Season of Tribute Roots of Nature from Art Gallery Fabrics, which I will have a link down below in the description for you to purchase from a quilt store that I trust and also personally shop at. Now with your layer cake 10-inch squares, we are first going to cut a 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle from the left side. Now if you have a rotating mat, this comes super handy because now we are going to cut a 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle off the top of the layer cake. Then next we are going to cut a 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle off the left side again, followed by a 2.5-inch by 5.5-inch rectangle off the top one last time, and we are done. Now you're just going to repeat this to every single layer cake 10-inch square for the quilt size that you are making. And as I mentioned, this rotating mat is fantastic for these types of quilt patterns, and y'all know I use this in pretty much every single quilt video. So with that said, I will put a link down below in the description for the one that I use, since I do get this question from time to time. And I will also have that updated free PDF pattern that is now available in 5 quilt sizes: baby, throw, twin, queen, and king. Now it's time to sew everything all back together again. So first, the layer cake log cabin is pieced in a pieced as you go method. So first we're going to start by taking one print 5-inch square. Then you're going to take one 2.5-inch by 5-inch rectangle that is different from the 5-inch square, and you're going to sew it to the top of the block with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Then continuing on, we are now going to take one 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle that is the same print as the previous 2.5-inch by 5-inch rectangle and sew it to the left side of the block with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Now do note that it will be longer than needed. Just make sure that overhang is hanging towards the bottom of the block. That way at the very end we will square everything up. Now next you are going to take a 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle that is different from the prints you have already selected, and now we are going to sew it to the top of the block with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And once again, it will be longer than needed. Just make sure that overhang is towards the right side. Then you're going to take a 2.5-inch by 10-inch rectangle that is the same print as the previous 2.5-inch by 7.5-inch rectangle and sew it to the left side of the block with a 1/4-inch seam allowance, which once again it will be longer than needed because now at this time now that our block is made, we are now going to square it up to an 8.5-inch square. Now, this is why I decided to trim everything at the end. That way we are just trimming the block once instead of 3 to 4 times. Now, all you'll need to do is repeat these steps to all of your quilt blocks until you've made enough for the quilt size that you are making. And then once all of your blocks are finished, it is time to lay your quilt out. So with the blocks you've made, you're now going to rotate every other block 90 degrees. And this is what makes it a great beginner-friendly quilt because the seams do not match up. The only seams that will technically match up are the blocks, which means, of course, all you have to do is sew your blocks together to form rows, and then lastly, sew those rows together to complete the quilt top. And here is what my quilt top looks like all finished. Now, as for the backing, this quilt is actually going to be gifted to a family member, and they love like minky, super soft backings. And what's interesting is Art Gallery Fabrics does usually have a flannel that matches the same collection. And this is the flannel that goes with this collection, which is gorgeous. And I'm going to be using this, and for the thread choices, I'm actually going to use glide thread in celery. And here's what my layer cake log cabin quilt pattern looks like all quilted out. And I do hope you have enjoyed today's tutorial. If you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.